This is NDTV. And you're watching NDTV Prime. In association with Micromax. Nothing like anything.
A few years ago, the debate was over whether we ought to use technology in education. Today, we've moved far beyond. The focus is now on how to best use technology to benefit the maximum number of students, how to leverage it to our advantage. Technology, after all, dominating every other aspect of our lives. How can we expect education not to try and keep up? That's, of course, the big question. A special panel now joining me today. Colonel Gopal Karunakaran, CEO of Shivnadar School, with us. Mr. Shantanu Prakash, Chairman and Managing Director of EduComp, also here. Sanjay Purohit, Founder, CEO, iProf India. And Ratnesh Kumar Jha, Managing Director, Cambridge University Press, South Asia. Thanks all so much for being with us. Colonel Karunakaran, in fact, I could start by asking you, there are so many parents who've always sort of been a bit reluctant or a bit apprehensive, if not reluctant, about just how much is too much when we talk about technology. Who do you think is the best person to decide how much is too much in the classroom when we talk about technology?
I think the singular answer to that is nobody knows. I'm not too sure.
Candid.
I don't think when we started the school 3 years ago, this is one of the foremost questions we asked ourselves. How much technology, which age do we start with technology inside the classroom? What is the ideal type of content? How do we enable the teachers to be able to use it because they are not digitally native as much as the generation which is the post the millennium generation. So I think in some ways I would say that we are not too sure. So it's the education fraternity, the parent community, the students themselves who need to sort of figure it out.
The stakeholders then sort of get together.
Figure it out. But for example, we took a very conscious decision that in nursery and KG there will be no technology. So, you know, that's sort of a starting point. We said there's just too much happening in their lives. It's too passive a medium. They must, as I was talking to Shantanu, they must learn to use things with their hands and be creative and spend time reflection.
Well, we'll go look at that because we've had many parents writing into us saying, you know, who decides, I can't get my child off this tech, and how much is too much, and iPads in the classroom. So we'll look at those kind of concerns a little later. But coming back, you know, to our focus on, I mean, there's no getting away from it, is there, Shantanu? It is a reality. The world is accepting it. We have to stand up and sort of grab the opportunity. What do you believe has been our one big success about adapting technology in the classroom, and what quickly would be the one big failure?
Well, I would say, Natasha, that if you look at a typical Indian classroom, I would even go so far to say that it's dysfunctional. You have 40 to 50 kids on an average in one classroom, crammed into a small space, about 400 square feet or so. Teachers in India are probably, if you look at a professional spectrum, are way down on how much we pay them. We should be paying them more. So we are not able to attract the best teachers or best human capital to the profession. And the curriculum just keeps getting loaded on every year. And on top of it, if you layer the fact that parents have this insane motivation for their kids to keep doing better and better, you have all the settings of a dysfunctional classroom. So when EduComp started, we said we need to figure out how can we make these teachers productive in the classroom. A technology was an answer. Okay, we started 10 years back. In fact, we are celebrating 10 years of digital classroom in India this year. And now there are about 300,000 classrooms across the country that use technology every day. So take a typical class, for example. You're teaching photosynthesis or you're teaching some abstract concept in math. Without technology, you have to revert to chalk and talk. And Gopal mentioned about these kids being digital natives. So, you know, I call them 3-screen kids. So they look at the TV screen. Okay, probably they watch NDTV. Okay.
We hope so. Talk about starting young.
You know, they have their cell phone screens. Okay, and then they have their tablet. So these kids respond differently to audio visual than kids of my generation or the generation previous to that.
That's of course one aspect of that. That's very heartening to know. But Mr. Purohit, there are of course lots of others who sort of say, you know, look at students enrolling for online courses. How many are actually finishing them? How many are wrapping up? What's the sort of concrete result? What are we looking at? How would you sort of respond to that?
Okay, yeah. We focus mainly on supplemental education, which is beyond the classroom.
Right.
And that's where we get complete data about how much people are using. I'll give you a data. We have about 30 lakh students which used iProf last year. And average uses is 7 minutes per day, supplemental education.
Right.
So it's about 1 hour a week. Average student studies 5 hours a week for supplemental education. So 20% of time they are already spending on iProf Study Buddy app. So what we see is a significant move towards the screen-based learning rather than a teacher-based learning.
Right.
Now, when you mentioned shortage in the classroom, there is an acute shortage for self-study.
Right.
There is no teachers available in the evening,
Right.
and we all know that classroom education is not sufficient. Student has to come home.
In fact, that was going to be my next point, really. That really is proof that you need to supplement what's happening in the classroom, and the need to look beyond just sticking to the classroom and the, you know, sort of interaction there.
That's right.
Is not good enough.
And that's right, and that's where the biggest boon has happened for India is the smartphones, because now the smartphones in our target group under 25 is about 30% people have it, and it's another 120 million smartphones are coming. So we are a mobile learning superstore. So you have all the courses. So that's where people download and use it on their smartphones.
And I think that's also where a lot of the aspirational young Indians are now there. Those
That's
you know
right.
tier 2, tier 3 towns that are sort of trying to also raise the bar for themselves. But you know, you mentioned tier 2, tier 3. I was going to get that in a little later, but I will now, Mr. Jha, with you perhaps, which is, you know, we've also sort of looked at, of course, Mr. Purohit, they're talking about tier 2, tier 3 and small town India also wanting to be part of this learning. But what about the many small towns and villages where, you know, our internet penetration still under the scanner? We're talking about digital India and all of that, but of course we still have a long way to go. How do we sort of get everyone on board?
So I see it from a two perspective. One is technology as an enabler, B, the engagement of student or the teacher or the whole classroom going up. So the whole classroom productivity or engagement going up. I would see that if there is an aspirational gesture which has been put forward by the government and say that, okay, by 2025 we'll be a digital progressive and everywhere an internet is going to happen. The challenge which it throws to us that how do we as a provider of education really start thinking in terms of engagement going up, high quality content, teaching capability going up. So all of that becomes the challenge for us. So if you put the assumption that all of other things really works well, which is internet penetration, etc., going to happen, then we start solving the problem. Now, those are very aspirational, and those are challenges which we have at this point in time. And we are sure all of us are working collectively to solve that problem. But the main theme still remains: what's the content, who's the teacher, how are you enabling them, how are you increasing the whole quality there.
Exactly. Shantanu, how much of this do you find absolutely frustrating, honestly, when you look at the challenge?
Yeah, the internet infrastructure in India has been frustrating for a while. I mean, I have 3G on my phone. Most of the time it works like 2G.
Exactly.
Okay. And this is something that you go to a small town. I mean, we can't even get voice calls, forget getting like consistent data on the phone. Apart from that, honestly, I don't see any challenge. And we all know for sure that this is only going to get better and better. It's going to get better, it's going to get more affordable. I was recently in a small town, I was in Panipat. I visit schools a lot. Went to grade 6. Okay, and just, you know, I took a show of hands. How many of you have computers at home? About 30% said computers at home. So how many of you have tablets? 5% tablets. How many of you have smartphones? 95% of 6th graders in Panipat, small middle class B sort of city, had smartphones. So I completely agree with what Sanjay is saying. You know, the next revolution in learning is going to be driven by personalization, affordable smartphones, and of course we need the internet infrastructure to energize this entire thing.
Go ahead. How people innovate the solutions. There is no internet, but they still need to learn. So we get more than few thousand orders every week for getting the content on an SD card. So
I see.
And you know, SD card is cheap now, and So people can get 30 GB or 16 GB SD card in 400, 500 rupees, get our content on that and ship it to them in their house. Sometimes no courier is taking it, so we have to send it through normal post. But then that SD card and their smartphone makes it a complete class. And so democratizing education, this is the movement has come with the help of smartphone, which is an enabler. And then as the internet improves, there will be more and more connectivity, but people have found the way to learn through pen drive, through SD cards, which is a huge industry has emerged. So when we used to ship, say, 100 a week, now we are shipping thousands a week to their homes. So that's a
That's
way.
the thing about being an enterprising nation, that you always find a way around the challenge that you have. I always find that remarkable about us as a society. There was also, I was just, among the things that I came across while researching this and this is basically a study that they've done in America on how, and it struck me was important is because one of the parents called us up with this, saying that how technology is playing a very crucial role for those with learning disabilities, learning challenges as well, and sort of making it more personal and engaging the student more and more beyond what a teacher can do in a classroom of 40, 50, and so on and so forth. And she was very keen that we sort of spend some time talking about this also. So, Chai, if I could sort of just bring you in at this point. This is, of course, another section which has also been left behind traditionally, also now standing up and saying, hey, here's something that we can be part of and gain a lot out of as well.
So that's where the point which I was referring in the last conversation is that when you look at the learning, for a moment think about technology as enabler, and when you look at learning, and if we look at these the disabled people which you like of them and allow them to learn, that's where the whole research aspect come into the picture, that how are you actually lifting up the learning. So for a visually disabled people, how are you actually getting into the researching to find out that how that learning content or learning curriculum is designed in that basis. So for example, if you look at our school system, our learning curriculum is very well defined. It's still a manual based. There's no technology which really happens there. And then when you actually see the similar strata of people learning in the similar way, how would you lift up the whole content intervention there? So I think the important point which we need to also start thinking now is to really, how do we make it more inclusive? And how do we do more learning engagement, content-based research to have inclusive going through?
How do we make it more inclusive? That will always be something that we'll keep, I guess we will keep innovating and keep coming up with new ideas. But Jonathan, I have to ask you, what was sort of the what next? Like, how do we do all of this?
We are entering into a very exciting age, the likes of which I think we haven't seen before. So I think I would say technology integration in schools has so far historically followed a certain path. First you had, of course, no technology, and then we started having computer labs in schools. And kids used to troop to the computer lab and used to learn how to do basic or word processing and so on and so on, right? It was a big deal at that time, okay? Now every school has computer labs, nobody talks about it anymore. The next phase was when you got smart class into the classroom. So the classroom got energized. And I think we are on the threshold of this revolution where the backpack is going to be replaced by a tech pack, I would say.
I'll give you 3 examples of what we do in the Shivnara schools. We have online content which is available to the student at home prior to coming into the class. So it's a flipped class. Flipped class was something which has happened for probably decades. It's about the professor in a college giving out content which you should be prepared for. But this is online content. There are videos, it's gamification. Children enjoy doing it. They get a lot of concepts clear before they come into class. And then the discussion the next day is centered around what is not understood or what needs to be shared. So there's a second level of understanding something that you worked with earlier. So that's one sort of an aspect. The other aspect is video capture. So we capture classes which happen inside the class, in the school. The teacher can review that, see about her own teaching methodology. The student can go back when the student was not attentive in a particular class, or if the student was absent, you got access to it, it's stored on cloud, so you can look at it. So that's another level. The third thing is a clicker, like Amitabh Bachchan on Kaun Banega Crorepati. So the teacher just has to figure what are the concepts that she needs to have been understood as learning objectives at the end of the class. And then you do a clicker test. The children love it. You get a feedback on how well that's been learned, and you also know what hasn't been learned.
Right.
You can go back to it.
I just want to take a quick break at this point. There's a lot more that we're discussing as we talk about technology in the classrooms. These are classrooms not of the future anymore, but classrooms of the present. Classrooms are going to be a reality in the school that perhaps you went to very soon. We're taking a quick break. Back with more.